Hello students, in our today's video lecture we are going to learn about the plant cell and its structure. So you know that what is meant by cell. Cell, it's a basic structural functional as well as it is the smallest unit of life, right? So all the living organisms they have composed of their body with the cell. So some living organism they are having single cells, some living organism they are having two or more than two cells, right? So on the basis of that, some living organism called as a unicellular, which have only single cell, or some living organism they are having more than two or more than two cells. Then such kind of living organism is called as a multicellular living organism, like the higher plants, humans, etc. Right? So that's why. So this cell perform the very important functions. They have the different kinds of cell organelles, right, which are present inside the cell. So today we are going to learn about the details about the plant cells, right? So this is the structure of the plant cell, right? If I am considering about the eukaryotic cell, right? So higher plants they have the eukaryotic cells like the angiosperm, gymnosperm, right? As well as the pteridophytes, bryophytes, some of the algae also, right? So in this diagram, in this photograph, you can see the structure of this plant cell, which have the different kinds of cell organelles, like the outermost uh, membrane, which is which covers the plant cell, that is called as a cell wall, right? So this is the characteristic feature of plant cell, that plant cell having the cell wall. Animal that doesn't have cell wall, right? No, so we doesn't have cell wall. So this is the major difference between the plant as well as animal cells, right? Then they have the what we can call the cell membrane as well as the plasma membrane, then the cytoplasm, nucleus, mitochondria, then all different kinds of cell organelle, right? So each cell organelle they perform their respective functions, right? So the number, size as well as the shape of the cell they varies from the different organism to organism, right? Some mm, organism they have single cell, some organism they have larger cell, smaller cell, as well as the shape of the cell is also get varies. If I'm talking about the animals, we have the nerve cells, right? So you know what is the nerve cells. It's very elongated as well as very long and larger in size. But if I'm talking about the red blood cells, that is RBCs, then you know that what is the shape of that RBCs, right? They are generally oval as well. They are circular in shape, right? So their shape get varies from different organisms to organisms, right? So in this today's lecture we are going to learn about the plant cell structure, the plant cell which have the different kinds of cell organelles. So we will get the idea about that different cell organelles also, roughly. And at the end of the lecture we are going to learn about the differences between the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, right? So this is important topic which we going to cover today. So these are the components of plant cells, right? So every eukaryotic plant cell they have this such kind of cell organelles like the cell wall, right? So cell wall is the characteristic feature of plant cells. Then cell membrane, you also called it as a plasma membrane. Then cytoplasm, nucleus, plastids, vacuoles, right? Golgi apparatus, you also call it as a Golgi complex or Golgi bodies also, right? So there are different name of this cell organelle, that is Golgi apparatus. Then the ribosomes, okay, then mitochondria, lysosomes, right? Then might sorry, here it get repeated. Then the cytoskeleton as well as the peroxisome, right? So these are different kinds of cell organelles, they are present in the plant cells, right? So first we will see one by one, that is the cell wall. So here you can see the structure of this cell wall, right? So cell wall, it's a rigid layer which is composed of the cellulose, right? Then glycoproteins, lignins, pectins, right, as well as hemicellulose. So it is just located outside the cell membrane. It means the plant cell is covered by the cell wall, right? The primary function of the cell wall is to protect and provide the structural support to the cell. So whatever the different kinds of pathogens they are present outside the uh, environment of the plant, right? So this pathogen can be attack on the plant body, but such kind of pathogens entry inside the cell get restricted by the cell wall, right? So we can move from one place to the another place. Animals can move from one place to the another cell, another place. But why plant cannot move? Because of the presence of cell wall, right? So this cell wall defines the shape of the cell. Okay, so in this diagram you can see the this composition of the cell wall, that is the pectin as well as the cross linking glycans, then cellulose membrane. So cellulose, it's cellulose is one of the kind of the carbohydrates, right? Then here you can see this cell wall is get integrated with the plasma membrane, right? So this cell wall, it consists of primary cell walls, middle lamellae, as well as the tertiary cell wall. So in detail we are going to learn about this cell wall in the next in future lectures, right? So in this lecture we are going to learn about its like the cell organelles, and we will just get the rough idea about it. But in future lecture we are going to learn in details of each of the cell organelles, right? The next cell organelle, that is the cell membrane, which is also called as the plasma membrane. So it's a selective semi-permeable membrane, so that is present inside the cell wall, and it's the limiting layer of the cytoplasm, right? So the cell membrane plays an important role in the regulating the entry and the exit of the specific molecules within the cells. So in this plasma membrane you can find the structure of this plasma membrane here, right? So it is also called as a lipid bilayer, right? So it means this consists of the lipids as well as the proteins, cholesterols, right? And as it's having double layer of these lipids, so that's why it is called as a lipid bilayer, that is the plasma membrane, right? So this plasma membrane act as a semi-permeable membrane, right? Semi means half. Some molecules can pass, some molecules cannot pass through the plasma membrane. So which molecules can pass? Right now, all the gaseous molecules like the carbon dioxide as well as the oxygen, different kinds of sulfur dioxide. So all the gaseous molecules, they can easily diffuse, easily pass through the cell membrane, right? So we can inhale, exhale, right? Now we inhale the oxygen as well and exhale the carbon dioxide, right? So for this inhale, exhale, for this respiration, we doesn't have to spend the energy, right? So it takes place automatically by diffusion process, right? So these gases, they can easily pass through the cell membrane. That's why we doesn't need any kind of energy to transport such kind of gaseous molecules. But all the ions like the magnesium, calcium, sodium, potassium, all the ions, they cannot pass through the plasma membrane, right? So how they can transport but right now, so all these ions like the calcium, magnesium, potassium, boron, as well as the sodium, okay, so all these ions, they are necessary for us. So how we get this, right? So there are some specific transporter which is located on the plasma membrane. So in details we are going to learn about the plasma membrane in the future, right? Then the cytoplasm, the cytoplasm. So cytoplasm, it's a semi-fluid substance, right? Which is just spread out in the cell, which is present outside to the nuclear membrane and inside to the cell membrane, right? So that is called as a cytoplasm. So it act as a medium for the biological reactions, like the protein synthesis. Whatever it will be takes place, it will take place in the cytoplasm. Different kinds of biological reactions, glycolysis, etc., all these biochemical reactions will takes place in the cytoplasm. The substance of living cells, including the cell wall and the content of the vacuole, is called the protoplasm. So that is the major we can say difference between the cytoplasm and protoplasm, right? Then one of the largest cell organelles which is present inside the eukaryotic cell is the nucleus, right? So we can consider it as a largest cell organelles in the eukaryotic cells, that is called as a nucleus. So nucleus, it's a membrane bound structure, right? It's having the membrane, right? Now that is present only in the eukaryotic cells. So this is the characteristic of eukaryotic cell, that the eukaryotic cell having membrane bound nucleus, right? Sometimes we say that nucleus is absent in the prokaryotic cell while present in the eukaryotic cell, but this is the wrong concept. What is the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell is that the genetic material, that is either RNA or DNA, right, present in the cell. In the prokaryotic cell, the genetic material, right, it just spread out in the cytoplasm. It doesn't have any kind of membrane bound to it. But in the eukaryotic cell, the DNA or RNA, right, so that genetic material is get covered by the membrane, so that is called as a nuclear membrane. So this is called as a advanced nucleus, right? While the genetic material just spread out in the prokaryotic cell, that is called as a primitive nucleus, right? So this nucleus is consist of the nuclear sap, nucleolus, and the chromosome, right? So what present inside this nucleus? Chromosomes, that is nothing but the DNA, right? So DNA get condensed to form the structure of chromosomes. So chromosomes are there, nucleus is there, nuclear sap is there, right? Means whatever the liquid is present inside the nucleus, that is called as a nuclear sap. The vital functions of a nucleus is to store the DNA, right? It means it contains the genetic material, or this DNA is required for the hereditary information and for the cell division, metabolism, and the growth. So we can call this nucleus as a brain of cell, right? So our body functions, if I am talking, right, so what I want to talk, so this will be controlled by our brain, means my brain, okay? If I want to walk, if I want to run, so all this activity is controlled by my brain. So as like that, whatever the reactions, whatever the functions perform inside the cell, so all these functions will be controlled by the nucleus, right? So this, how it can control the functions? Because nucleus having the DNA, so DNA can be get transcribed into the RNA, and RNA can translate to form the proteins. So and this protein will perform their functions either as enzymes, either as a structural proteins, or different. So like the hormones. So these functions they perform by the protein, and from where this protein is encoded? From the RNA, and from where the RNA will come? From the DNA, and where the DNA is present? Inside the nucleus. So in this way the nucleus controls the function of cell, right? So here in this photograph you can see the structure of this nucleus. So very dark region which is present inside the nucleus, which is circular, so that is called as a nucleolus, right? So this nucleus having double membrane bound structure, it means there are two membranes, and that membrane is called as a nuclear membrane, right? So sometimes what happen, the outer membrane of this nucleus, so nucleus having two membrane, outer membrane and inner membrane. So outer membrane is sometimes integrated with the endoplasmic reticulum, right? So Here you can see in this structure, this endoplasmic reticulum get integrated with the outer membrane of nucleus. This nucleus having some small pores, right? Means whatever the material which is necessary to transport inside the nucleus, so that will be transported from the nuclear pore, or whatever the material which is transported outside the nucleus, so that also get transported throughout this nuclear pore, right? So this is the structure of nucleus, which is having nucleolus, chromatin is nothing but the genetic material, that is the chromosomes, right? Nuclear envelope, nuclear pores, so all these are the parts of nucleus. Then plastids. So the presence of the plastid is the characteristic of plant cells, right? So this plastid, the presence of the plastid, like, so it's a characteristic of plant kingdom. So they have the double membranes, means they're covered by the two membranes, inner membrane, outer membrane. So it is concerned with the synthesis and the particularly as a main components of the photosynthesis. So plants can perform photosynthesis, means they synthesize their own food in the form of carbohydrate, that is glucose, right? So where this photosynthesis will be take place? Inside the plastids, right? So these plastids, there are three different kinds of plastids, okay? Leucoplast, chloroplast and the chromoplast. So each plastid performs some typical function in the plant kingdom, in the plant life. First we will see the leucoplast, right? So leucoplasts, they are found in the non-photosynthetic tissue of plants. So plant having many tissue, but every tissue doesn't have capability to perform photosynthesis, right? Only green cells which is present inside the leaves. So sometimes stem of the plant, they are having the green cells, so they perform the photosynthesis, right? But these leucoplasts, they are found only in the non-photosynthetic cells. They are used for the storage of proteins, lipids and starch, right? Means the function of this leucoplast is the storage of food material. Then the second kind of plastid is the chloroplast. You know what is meant by chloroplast, right? So each chloroplast, it contains a green colored pigment, so that is called as a chlorophyll pigment, right? So why plant is looking like green in color? Because of the presence of this pigment, that is chlorophyll pigment, right? So in the plant there are different kinds of chlorophyll pigment, like the chlorophyll pigment A, chlorophyll pigment B, C, D, E, then pheophytin, carotenoid, xanthophyll, etc. Right? So these pigments, they are present inside this chloroplast. The chlorophyll pigments, they absorb the light, right, which comes from the sun, right? So what is the source of light for us as well as for the plants? Is the sun, right? So this light get converted into the glucose, right, with the help of carbon dioxide and water. So this process is called as a photosynthesis. So this will be takes place inside the chloroplast. Then the third kind of plastids, that is called as a chromoplast. Chroma means what? The color, right? The plastids which is responsible for the coloration in the plants, right? For example, mango. So when mango is unripened, then it's green in color, right? But when it get ripened, then what will happen? Mango color will going to change. That is, it will convert from green into the yellow color. Then strawberry. So when strawberry will get ripened, it changes its color, right? From the colorless into the pink or red, we can see. Okay. So this coloration, as well as you can see the flowers. So different kinds of flower. For example, rose is having red color as well as yellow color. Okay. Then black also. So these different kinds of color of the petals as well as the fruit is get because of the presence of chromoplast, right? So they have the red, orange, yellow, different kinds of pigments which provide the color to the all ripened fruits and the flowers. So this is about the plastids. Then we'll see the next cell organelle, that is called as a vacuole, right? The vital function of the vacuole, it apart from the storage, is to sustain the turgid pressure against the cell wall, right? The central vacuole is consists of cell sap. Its cell sap is what? It means it's a mixture of the salt, enzymes, and other substances. So in this photograph, we can see this cell sap. It is present inside the cell. Then central vacuole and the membrane of the vacuole. Remember, membrane of the vacuole is called the tonoplast, right? So whatever the wastage which is present inside the cell, so that will be just dumping inside the vacuole. As we have dustbin in the house, right? No, so whatever waste in our home, so we just put in the dustbin. So as like that, vacuole is like the dustbin. So whatever the waste present inside the cell, so it just get dumped out in the vacuole. As well as the most important function, right? So these vacuoles, they contains the calcium ion, right? So calcium when come in this cytoplasm, then muscle will going to contract, cell will going to contract, right? Our movement, body movement, it can be takes place because when this cell will be get means the calcium will transport inside the cytoplasm, cell will going to contract, muscle will going to contract, right? And when it will be get released, calcium will be transported from the cytoplasm to the vacuole. In case of plant, right? So this is the function of this vacuole. Then one of the important cell organelle, that is called as a ribosome. All the cell organelles are important, right? But why I am highlighting to this ribosome, you will get the idea about this. So these are the smallest membrane bound organelle, right? So it is the one of the smallest membrane bound cell organelle present inside the eukaryotic cell, which composed of the RNA and the proteins, right? So these ribosomes, these are the combination of RNA and proteins. These are the sites for the protein synthesis. So hence they are also referred to as the protein factories of the cells, right? So here you can see the thread like structure. So it is not a thread, it's a mRNA which is running through the ribosomes. So these ribosomes having this small unit and large subunit. So there are two subunit which ribosome is having, that is small subunit and large subunit. And through this large and small subunit, mRNA will be passed, and this mRNA will be get read by this ribosome, right? When tRNA will come, it will insert inside the ribosome, and thus amino acid will be formed. So in this way, from one amino acid to two amino acid, three amino acid, so as like that the peptide get formed and it will turn out into the proteins. So these ribosomes are involved in the synthesis of proteins, right? So that process is called as a translation process. So in the molecular biology of this paper, we are going to learn about this translation process, right? Golgi complex, or you also called it as a Golgi bodies or Golgi apparatus, right? There are different name of this. So these are found in all eukaryotic cells. They are disc-shaped bodies. So these Golgi complex are involved in the protein transport inside the cell. So in this photograph, you can see the structure of this Golgi complex, right? So there is a cis phase and trans phase, right? So cis phase, it gets shorter there, and trans phase it get larger here. They form the vesicles. They have the cisternae, elongated structure, and at the end they that is called as a lumen, and they form the secretory vesicles. So whatever the protein will be synthesized inside the cytoplasm, right? So that protein have to get tagged, right? No, because this protein will perform its function in the plasma membrane or inside the nucleus as like the DNA polymerase. So this protein have to be get tagged, and the tagging will be done by the endoplasmic reticulum. So this tag is nothing but the address or the destiny of the proteins. After the tagging done by the endoplasmic reticulum, that protein will be get towards the or transported towards the Golgi complex, and this Golgi complex they forms the vesicles to the proteins, right? So why there is a need of vesicles in the proteins? Because in the cytoplasm there is an enzyme that is called as a protease enzyme, and this protease enzyme can degrade the proteins. If protein will be no there, okay, so all individuals will going to die, like you also, right? So these proteins are necessary for every living organism, and thus to protect the proteins from the protease, so this protein have to be get coated, they have to be get protected, and such protection will be done by the Golgi complex, so that is called as a vesicles. And thus, so this Golgi complex will read that address from where that protein have to be get transported. If that protein have to be transported to this cell membrane, then the protein will be, that address will be get read by that Golgi complex, and Golgi complex will send those protein to its destiny, like this cell membrane or nucleus or like the mitochondria or chloroplast, etc., right? So this is the function of this Golgi complex. Then the next cell organelle, that is called the mitochondria. So these are the double membrane organelles. Remember, double membrane organelles are like the nucleus, chloroplast, as well as mitochondria, right? So mitochondria is also having the double membrane cell, double membrane structure, right? It's this organelle found in the cytoplasm of all the eukaryotic cells. They provide energy rich molecules to the cells by breaking down the carbohydrates, right? They are referred as a powerhouse of cells, as they generate the energy in the form of ATP, right? Why they are called as a powerhouse of cell? Because ATP synthesis, ATP formation will be takes place inside the mitochondria by the breaking down of the food material, that is called as a carbohydrates in the form of glucose, right? So this glucose will be get break down, okay, in the TCA cycle. You know the TCA cycle, tricarboxylic acid cycle, or you can also call it as a Krebs cycle. So during the Krebs cycle, this food get catalyzed, it get break down to form the energy rich molecules, that is called as a ATP, right? And this ATP get generated inside this mitochondria. So this mitochondria, you can see here, it is also called as a semi-autonomous cell organelle, because this mitochondria is also having its own genetic material, as like the nucleus. So nucleus having the genetic material, that is DNA. Mitochondria is also having its own genetic material, right? So, but this genetic material, that is DNA, is circular DNA, okay? So here you can see inside this mitochondria, there is a two membrane, right? Outer membrane and inner membrane, and in between them there is a space, outer membrane and inner membrane having this space, so that is called as a intermembrane space, okay? Then inside this inner membrane, you can see the gel like substance like the cytoplasm, right? So that is called as a matrix. There is a presence of granules also, then ATP synthesis enzyme also, as well as the circular DNA also, right? Ribosomes also, because this DNA get replicated there only, as well as their as they are having the ribosome inside the mitochondria, it also get translated, right? So it means this mitochondria can synthesize their own proteins, but not all the proteins which are required for the mitochondria get synthesized by own. So it means it depends on the nucleus also. That's why it is called as a semi-autonomous cell organ. Semi means half. It can synthesize its own protein as well as it depends on others, like it depends on nucleus also. So that's a semi-autonomous cell organelle. Then the lysosomes. So these lysosomes are called as the suicidal bags, you know very well, right? As they hold the digestive enzymes in the enclosed membrane, they perform the functions of cellular waste disposal by the digesting the worn out organelle as well as the food particles and the foreign bodies in the cell. So whatever the functions, like not function actually, whatever the infection you will get, like the viral as well as bacterial infection, so this lysosome will get activated, right? And they degrade such kind of foreign bodies. If the mitochondria cannot synthesize the ATP, it means mitochondria is it's not performing its function. Then what will happen? The lysosome will get engulfed to the mitochondria and it will degrade the mitochondria, right? If the cell organelles like the Golgi complex or endoplasmic reticulum, they are not performing their functions, means they are defective, then lysosome will engulf them and degrade them. Same as in the case of nucleus also. If cell will becomes non-functional, it means if cell will get injured, then whole cell can be get digested by this lysosome. Means lysosome degrade our own cell, right? So that's why it is called as a suicidal bags. Okay. The next cell organelle, that is the cytoskeleton. So the cytoskeleton, it's a network of fibers, right, throughout the cytoplasm. It gives the shape to the cell. It organizes the cell organelle and play important role in the molecular transport. So here you can see the thread-like structures. So these are nothing but the cytoskeleton. So this cytoskeleton maintain the integrity of the cell, right? If the cytoskeleton will be break down, cell will going to burst and cell will going to die, right? So this is the important functions of this cytoskeleton. Then peroxisomes. So this peroxisome, the presence of the peroxisome is the characteristic of plants. It means plant having only the peroxisomes. So this tiny structure bound by a single membrane, and they contains the enzymes which play important role in the breakdown of uric acid, right? So whatever we drink the water, so that water will be get filtered by our kidney, right? And thus during the filtration of this water, during the filtration of the food as well as whatever it is, right, uric acid get generated. So this uric acid get break down and this uric acid get convert into less toxic form, right? And thus it get just placed outside our body, right? Then it break down the hydrogen peroxide. You know the hydrogen peroxide. If you get the wound, right? So you apply that liquid on your wound, and thus that liquid is called as a hydrogen peroxide. So this hydrogen peroxide, it's a very very unstable molecule. It can react with anything, right? So this unstable molecule is very very dangerous because they can what we can say, they can interfere with our DNA structure also. They can kill our cells also, right? So such dangerous biomolecules, that is the hydrogen peroxide, have to be get break down, and this has been done by the peroxisome. Then amino acid, fatty acids, so these molecules can be break down by the peroxisomes. Then at the end of this lecture we will going to compare the two different cells. So this is very important topic, it can be asked for the examination, right? We will distinguish in between the eukaryotic cell and the prokaryotic cells, right? So first we will start with first characteristic, that is the definition of these cells. So eukaryotic cells, these are any cell that contains a clearly defined nucleus, membrane bound nucleus, okay, as well as membrane bound cell organelles is called eukaryotic cells. And any unicellular organism that does not contain a membrane bound nucleus as well as membrane bound cell organelle, so that is called as a prokaryotic cell. Examples of eukaryotic cells are animals, higher plants, fungi, right? So these are the organism which contain the eukaryotic cells, right? Then some bacteria as well as archaebacteria, they have the prokaryotic cell, right? Then in the eukaryotic cell, nucleus is membrane bound, while in the prokaryotic cell, nucleus is not membrane bound, means genetic material is just spread out in the cytoplasm, so that is called as the nucleoid region. The cell size of the eukaryotic cell is larger, which varies from 10 to 100 micrometer, or even larger than that also. But eukaryotic cell is smaller. It means its size get like the less than a micrometer, single micrometer to the 5 micrometers. Then the DNA replication, it is highly regulated with the selective origins and sequences. So what is DNA replication, how is that process takes place, we will learn in the future lectures. In the prokaryotic cell, it replicates the entire genome at single time only. The eukaryotic organism types, they are usually multicellular, while prokaryotic, they are unicellular, right? The chromosomes, they are inside the eukaryotic cell, usually they are more than one. In the prokaryotic cell, one long single loop of the DNA and the plasmid is there in the prokaryotic cells, like the bacteria they have. Then the eukaryotic cells, they have the ribosomes, which is the 80S type, while in the prokaryotic cell, they have the 70S ribosome. Eukaryotic cell, they grow very slowly, while the prokaryotic cells, they grow faster because they have mostly single cell. The organelles like the endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi complex, right? Mitochondria, chloroplast, peroxisomes, lysosomes, right? So these are present in the eukaryotic cells while absent in the prokaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells having only primitive nucleus, cytoplasm, then cell membrane and ribosomes, right? The ability to store the hereditary information in the eukaryotic cell is tremendous, right? They have good ability to store the genetic material, while in the prokaryotic cells they have this ability, right? But it's not very goodly developed. The cell wall in the eukaryotic cell is like the simple, which is present in the plants and the fungi, while in the prokaryotic cell, the cell wall is complex, present in the prokaryotes, like some prokaryotic bacteria. The plasma membrane is also present in the both the cells, as well as the cytoplasm is also present in both the cells, that is eukaryotic and prokaryotic cell, right? So this is the clear cut idea about the eukaryotic cell and the prokaryotic cell. So this is important topic, you have to remember it very well, right? So today we will stop here. Thank you.